The movie begins in 1998 Banyuwangi, during the dawn prayer when ninjas attack Semedi's house. They take out Semedi and severely injure Rahayu, leaving Semedi's head pinned to the gate. In 1998, hundreds of people in Indonesia considered sorcerers were massacred. The massacres occurred in the Banyuwangi area, with over 100 taken out and dozens tortured or discarded. 2 years later, Rahayu works at Miss Endang's shop. Her grandfather Sentot suggests she stay with him instead. Sentot brings harvest and money to Rahayu's mother, Nuning, and insists Rahayu return to Wonosalam, as her father asked him to care for her. Nuning and Sentot disagree on whether Rahayu should stay. Sentot says it's Rahayu's decision, while Nuning, who loves Rahayu as her own, wants her to stay. Sentot reminds Nuning that her husband wanted to sell the place before he perished, and that people have become more judgmental since. Later, Rahayu delivers bananas from Sentot to Mr. Surwo, but he isn't home. On her way back, something catches Rahayu's eye, a cane that triggers a flashback. In the flashback, Semedi discovers his wife passed in their bed and finds Rahayu hiding in a wardrobe, clutching the cane. Surwo questions Rahayu and reveals that her late father entrusted him with the cane for safekeeping due to its sacred nature. He cautions her that mishandling it could lead to a fate similar to her mother's. Rahayu mentions bringing bananas from her mother and departs. Surwo stops her, mentioning Sentot's persistent plans to sell the shop house. He acknowledges Rahayu's dislike for her step-grandfather, but points out that selling the shop could allow her to return to her childhood home, which her father donated as a prayer room behind the market. Upon reaching the prayer room, Rahayu observes a man entering. The man praying is tapped on the shoulder and startled. The lights go out, and he hears spirits repeating his prayers. Terrified, he runs away. Rahayu investigates, and a ghost appears behind her. A female voice whispers prayers with her, spooking her. Soon after, the lights go out, and Rahayu sees ghosts praying with her, but they disappear when she looks back. Relieved, but terrified to find herself surrounded again, she's suddenly transported back to her childhood home. She finds her father performing a ritual on a man, chanting Javanese spells. Spirits possess the man, his eyes turn white, and a snake emerges from his mouth. Her father forces the snake back into the man's mouth, but another snake comes out. He destroys the second snake, and it leaves the house and approaches Rahayu. She tries to catch it, but her father appears, and the snake transforms into a cane. Rahayu leaves the prayer room and the house. The next day, Riri accuses Rahayu of using a charm to steal her customers and calls her a witch. Rahayu, enraged, attacks Riri. Ratman calms her with prayers. A woman suggests Rahayu is possessed by spirits from the prayer room, like her nephew. Ratman asks Rahayu if she is disturbed by what happened in the prayer room, but she leaves without answering. Later, Nuning asks Rahayu if she has been praying in the prayer room and is disturbed by the spirits. Rahayu tells Nuning that nobody disturbed her, but Nuning advises her to recite Tawuz and spit 3 times to her left whenever she feels the presence of spirits. Later, Rahayu returns to the prayer room. There, she sees a child's ghost on a man but dismisses it. As she prays, the windows close, and she sees a ghost behind a curtain. The ghost grows and shrinks as she looks up and down. She recites Tawuz and spits, but then sees a ghost holding its head. She falls and is surrounded by ghosts who trap her. However, when she does manage to stand, she finds herself back in her old house and sees a man in agony on a bed. Upstairs, her father performs a ritual on another man as her younger self appears and sits beside her. Rahayu watches spirits pluck boils from the man's wounds and give them to young Rahayu, but Semedi tells her to discard them. Suddenly, Rahayu hears a girl screaming downstairs. She rushes down to find her younger self possessed and seeks Sentot's help. Sentot warns Semedi of the child's power and the consequences of Semedi's possession by a Jinn. Sentot performs an exorcism on young Rahayu, sending Rahayu back to the prayer room where she is trapped with the spirits. Before the spirit can reach her, she manages to escape. Meanwhile, Mina confronts Nuning about Rahayu's attack on her daughter. A neighbor claims Rahayu is haunted, and her late father was a shaman. Ratman defends Rahayu, but a woman dismisses him. Rahayu apologizes, and Riri, sensing danger, urges her mom to leave. However, Mina refuses to accept Rahayu's apology, calling her a devil's child and reminding everyone that her father was beheaded because he was a sorcerer. Rahayu, furious at Mina's accusations, is stopped by Nuning before she can lash out. After Mina and Riri leave, Nuning confronts Rahayu, asking why she had to cause such a scene. Rahayu responds, saying she was born here and this is all her father left behind. Nuning reminds her that she's done everything she wanted, asking her to act normally so they can live peacefully. Nuning then mentions that Sentot wants them to live with him, but Rahayu accuses Sentot of wanting to take over her father's wealth. She believes he's been manipulating her, marrying her father after her mother passed away. And now that her father is gone, it's easier for Sentot to claim the inheritance. Rahayu goes to the prayer room, where she finds Ratman finishing his prayers. He reassures her that there is nothing to worry about, offering to stay with her, but she tells him to leave. As she begins praying, she notices someone else in the room. Upon closer inspection, she is horrified to see herself sleeping on a demon's lap. She tries to flee but finds herself back in her old house. No matter how hard she tries to leave, she keeps returning to the same place. Surrounded by ghosts, she is about to be attacked when Ratman saves her, and she wakes up in her own house. Surwo and Ratman are there. They question Rahayu about the spirits she may have summoned. Surwo believes Rahayu's disrupted prayers and the events surrounding her father's demise are evidence of her power. He reveals that Rahayu can unknowingly summon spirits, and it was they who visited her in the prayer room. The next day, Rahayu wakes up sick and sees spirits. Mina, angry that Nooning is stealing her customers, accuses her of using a charm and destroys her shop. A snake bites Mina, and her leg begins to fester. Later, the neighbors gathered outside Nooning's house, demanding she come out. Surwo arrived and asked what was happening. One of the men accused Rahayu's family of spells on them. Surwo defends Nooning and Rahayu, warning the neighbors not to speak ill of the deceased. The man said that if anything bad happened, Surwo would be to blame, and the crowd disperses. That night, Rahayu notices a flock of bats flying above her house. She briefly closes her eyes, and when she opens them, everything around her has turned black. Meanwhile, the snake that had been lurking slays Mina by suffocating her. Later, when Riri enters her mother's room with food, she is horrified to find Mina's lifeless body. The next day, the neighbors return and accuse Nooning and Rahayu of causing Mina's passing. Surwo defends them, asserting that even if Samedi had been a sorcerer, both he and his wife are gone now, and there's no way Nooning or Rahayu could be responsible for the demise of Mina or Riri. A man from the crowd retorts that while Surwo had defended them before, now he can see that the people are demanding justice. Surwo asks if they plan to behead Nooning and Rahayu as well. A woman in the crowd insists that they first must admit to their wrongdoing, after which a proper punishment can be determined. Rahayu angrily refuses to admit to something her family didn't do, and demands the crowd leave. Surwo proposes a Pocong oath where Nooning must swear her innocence in front of God to resolve the matter. The crowd reluctantly agrees and leaves. The following day, Sentot visits Surwo and suggests that the shop houses need to be cleansed, and that Rahayu needs to be exorcised again. Surwo counters, stating that people need solid proof, and the Pocong oath will provide the answer. Sentot warns that he's only making things worse, and hints that he may be the real source of Rahayu's troubles, as he's now taking over her father's wealth. That night, everyone gathers at the mosque for the Pocong oath ritual, and Rahayu and her brother stay at home. However, Rahayu is seen walking in a trance-like state. At the mosque, the ritual begins as Nooning is wrapped in a shroud. Surwo instructs her to repeat the words of the Pocong oath, and she follows along. As Nooning's eyes close, she enters another dimension. Meanwhile, Rahayu is seen praying in the prayer room, and she begins to sense the spirits around her. In the other realm, Nooning becomes haunted by the spirits that appear behind Rahayu. As Rahayu finishes her prayers, she becomes possessed and lets out a powerful roar that causes the spirit before her to kneel. Soon, other spirits follow suit, kneeling before her as well. Nooning, still in the other realm, sees Rahayu surrounded by spirits. As she watches, green smoke enters Rahayu's mouth, and the vision ends abruptly, causing Nooning to wake up. The crowd at the mosque is spooked by what happened, and Surwo reassures them, saying that Nooning has kept her promise. He tells everyone to leave because he believes no one will suffer that night. The following day, Ratman tells Rahayu about rumors that someone plans to buy her shop house. Rahayu dismisses it, but later finds Nooning with potential buyers. Rahayu confronts Nooning, who reveals that her father had connections with black magic, and that evil spirits were pursuing her during the Pocong oath. Rahayu, shocked, asks how Nooning is still alive after all that. Nooning tells her that she saw Rahayu there, among the spirits, and the spirits had their eyes on her. Rahayu, now furious, declares that Sentot's desire to take over her father's wealth is the real evil, and she becomes possessed in front of Nooning. A spirit appears behind her, controlling her, and reveals that it was Sentot who planned Samedi's slaughter. The spirit explains that when they were expelled from their home by the community, there was one person with a wound on his face, a wound that Rahayu had caused. The spirit further reveals that Sentot knew the men responsible for her father's passing. Rahayu warns Nooning to stop believing that Sentot is holy, or else her fate will end up like that of her real mother. With that, Rahayu faints and collapses to the ground. When Rahayu wakes up, it's already evening. She goes to Endong's shop to apologize for being late, but she is fired. She then goes to the prayer house, which transforms into her old home. She's haunted by memories and becomes possessed by green smoke. Snakes emerge from her mouth, one heading towards Nooning's home and another biting Endong. Nooning notices the first snake on her bed and runs away, but when she looks back, it vanishes. However, she is horrified to see the snake wrapped around Aji's neck. Nooning grabs the snake and is then confronted by Rahayu, who tries to stop her from slaying it. But in a panic, Nooning pushes Rahayu away and slaughters the snake. When she calms down, she is shocked to realize that she has just slayed Aji. Samedi's spirit appears, and Nooning, distraught, begs for forgiveness, feeling she deserves to perish. Samedi's spirit extends his hand, compelling her to hang herself. Rahayu tries to stop her, faints, falling to the ground. In a heartbreaking moment, Nooning herself. Later, Rahayu is seen in Sentot's boarding school. Sentot's wife Ajing reassures Rahayu that she is safe there. Rahayu is worried that Sentot will perform an exorcism on her, but Ajing tells her that he will not harm her. Rahayu believes that Sentot is after her father's wealth, but Ajing explains that Sentot is already wealthy and doesn't need her father's money. Ajing then tells Sentot that in order to truly help Rahayu, he must first gain her trust. Rahayu is still drawn to the prayer room, where her father used to practice his rituals. Ajing believes there is something in that room that keeps pulling Rahayu back, and may be connected to the two different realms she has been experiencing. Later that night, Aji's spirit visits Ajing, who then wakes up and asks Sentot to search for the snake cane. Ajing comforts Rahayu, explaining that the spirits manipulated her and caused the snakes to emerge. Ajing reveals her similar past and assures Rahayu that Sentot can help her control her powers. Ajing explains that these evil spirits thrive on grudges and remorse and are drawn to those emotions, often taking control of the person's body. To free Rahayu from their influence, they need to completely cleanse her. Meanwhile, Sentot's men find a human skull and other witchcraft items in the prayer room, along with a photo of Rahayu. Sentot immediately takes the items to Surwo, who is shocked. One of Sentot's men also brings the snake cane to him. Surwo attempts to reclaim it, but Sentot warns him to stay away from Rahayu and his students. That night, Sentot begins the exorcism to cleanse Rahayu, but during the ritual, Rahayu sees the man who took out her father. She refuses to let go of the anger and resentment she feels. Rahayu becomes possessed during the ritual. Sentot tries to save her, but she accuses him of slaying her father. The truth is revealed. Surwo manipulated Sentot's son and his friend to steal from Semedi, and then had Semedi slayed. Rahayu confronts Surwo, asking if it isn't a sin to hide the sins of others. Surwo deflects by claiming that they all seek forgiveness from Allah. Rahayu, however, refuses to forgive him. At this moment, a possessed Wahid arrives and begins attacking Surwo. When Ajing tries to stop him, Wahid pushes her aside and slays Surwo. Afterward, Wahid snaps out of his possession, realizes what he's done, and begs for forgiveness from Sentot before ending his own. Rahayu and Ajing argue about Surwo's men's right to decide who lives or dies. Ajing places her hand on Rahayu's head and recites prayers, freeing Rahayu from the spirits that tormented her. After a few days, Ajing informs Rahayu that Kanzab is an evil spirit that disrupts people during prayers. However, the being that approached Rahayu isn't simply Kanzab, but darker entities that used Kanzab as a means to take full control of her body. When Rahayu questions if she could truly expel or control them, Ajing responds that she surrendered herself to God. Devils, she explains, live in their hearts where they feel revenge and anger. Rahayu had to be able to let go of these feelings, including her anger at Sarwo and everyone else who had hurt her. She can decide for herself how she would utilize the ability that God has bestowed upon her. At that moment, Ratman appears and tells her that he grew up there, and the movie ends.